Hi everyone. Today we are going to talk about 5.1D zeros of polynomials number 1. So you're going to be able to find the zeros of polynomials today. So before we start today's lesson, let's just can you do the do now? So factor this expression. I'll give you about 4 minutes. All right, let's go over this together. So when you factor, what's the first step to do? Yeah, you need to find out GCF, right? Greatest common factor. So I mentioned in the lesson, when you find out GCF, think two ways, right? First, the number part, and then second, variable. So first, the number 2, 4, 6. Which number is the greatest common factor for these three numbers? Yeah, 2, right? 2 is the greatest common factor. So all these three numbers has 2 in it. So, but if the highest degree, coefficient of the highest degree has a negative, then you better take out the negative also as a common factor. So negative 2 will be the number part. How about the variable? All of them has x, right? X, and then the lowest degree, which is x squared. So negative 2 and x squared will be GCF. So negative 2x squared. Then we take out the negative 2x squared, and then in the parentheses, when you multiply, distribute like this, it should be equal to original one. So negative 2x squared times what is x to the fourth power? X squared, right? And the negative 2x squared times what is negative 4x cubed? Yes, plus 2x. And then negative 2x squared times minus 3 will make 6x squared positive. So now, are we done? No. So you should, this factor is still quadratic equation. We have one factor here, negative 2x squared. This is a factor, and then also another factor here. But this one is again, is you should check if this is factorable or not. And you should factor this, right? So if any method you like, so you can factor. So if you can find the two numbers directly, 3 and negative 1, right? You multiply two numbers, get the negative 3, and then when you add the 2, so 3 and negative 1. Then x plus 3, x minus 1, like this, right? The negative 3 and 1, this is actually from Kim's method. 3 and negative 1 is the two numbers. All right. So you find out 3 negative 1 as a factor, x plus 3, x minus 1. This negative 3 and 1 is from the Kim's method, the zeros. Okay. So now, so you are done with the factoring. So today's lesson, zero of the polynomial. What is the zero again? So if you look at the definition, zero is where the function equals the value 0. Function means y value equals to 0, right? Where's the y value equal to 0? The x-axis. This line is a y equal to 0 value, right? Here, your function touches y equal to 0 here when x equal to 1. How about in this quadratic equation, how many zeros are there? 2 zeros. When x is negative 3 and when x is 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. So you have two zeros, negative 3 and 4, right? Like this, you can find out the zeros in the graphically. So zeros on the x-axis and right side must be equal to 0 when you solve it algebraically. Make sure everything is in the left side. in one side, all right? And just remember, this is not the 0 y-intercept, because it's x equal to 0 and y value is y-intercept. Okay, now let's look at this. X cubed minus 7x squared plus 4x minus 28 equal to 0. How do you find out the zeros? This one, all right? But now, when you find out zeros, now we know how. First, we should factor. Okay, factor the expression and set each factor equal to 0. So when you factor it, the first step is to think about the GCF. Always, if there is a GCF, any greatest common factor, you should do that first. But today, mostly we will focus on the degree 3 and 4 terms. Any polynomial with the degree 3 and 4 terms, we'll focus on this one only. But in general, when you see any function, you should, when you find out the when you do the factoring, you should start what? Think about GCF first, right? But now in this function, there is no GCF, no greatest common factor for all 4 terms. So you can just go with the, which method? Factor by grouping, right? So when you find the zeros, you should do what? Factor first. You factor it and then set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. That x value will be 0. All right, so you know how to factor this one. So I believe you know how to factor it. We did it many times, right, together. So let's factor briefly. So what is the first step? So how many zeros are here possible? Possible zeros is the same with the degree of the polynomial. So 3 possible zeros, right? 3 possible zeros. But if you look at the graph, you have only 1 0, and the other two are imaginary zeros. All right? Only 1 real zeros, but the other 2 zeros are imaginary zeros. So possible number of possible zeros is same with the degree of the polynomial. So 3. So 3 possible zeros, but if you look at the graph, 1 actual 0, real 0, and the other 2 zeros are what? Imaginary zeros. All right. So how many zeros do you see in the graph? I just mentioned you see only 1 0. Okay, 1 real 0 and 2 imaginary zeros. Then let's, you know how to find the factor up to here, the second step, right? So factor by grouping, you group 2 terms each. They are in the order of the degree, so you don't need to rearrange. So if they are not in the order of the degree, you should rearrange them like this. Now let's go. So you group them 2 by 2. And then first group you factor. Also second group you will factor, right? Separately. So what is the common from the first group? X squared. So x squared times x minus 7, right? And then second group, common is 4, right? So 4 will be taken out, and then in the parentheses, you will have x minus 7. If you do factor both of groups, then you will see that x minus 7 is in the both group, right, as a common. What do? We take out this x minus 7 as a factor, and in the other factor, in the other parentheses, what do you get? This x squared and this plus 4 will be in the other factor. Now, this second factor is a quadratic equation. You should check if this is factorable or not, right? Now, x squared plus 4, both of them are the squares, it's a sum, right? X squared plus 2 squared. But sum of the squares, you cannot factor, because when you do this, x squared plus 4, if you look through the graph, there will be no 0, right? no imaginary zeros. I mean, no real zeros from x squared plus 4. You cannot find any x value that x squared plus 4 becomes 0 because x squared is always positive, right? So you cannot factor this. So no 0 from here. Then what do? We are done factoring, right? We are done with factoring it. These are the factors. So if we ask to find the factor, please stop here. But now, today we are doing finding zeros. So what do? After finding the factors, you set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. That's what we are doing today. So each factor, x minus 7 equal to 0, and x squared plus 4 equal to 0, like this, and solve for x, right? X, you know how to solve for x from here. This one will give you x equal to 7. And then this one, you move 4 to other side, it will be negative 4. And then if you square it, you get the plus minus, and square root of 4, square root of negative 4 becomes what? Negative number in the square root becomes I, and then 2. So square root plus minus 2i, which is imaginary. So we have 3 zeros, right? We found the 3 zeros here, but this is the real zero, but these are not the actual zeros, imaginary zeros. So actual zero, we have how many actual zeros? We have only one real zero. And these are the 2 imaginary zeros, which are not zeros. All right. So if you do see now, this is a error analysis. Can you figure out which one is the mistake, and then can you correct them? All right. Let's do it together now. Which step is error? Is the first step is correct? X squared from the first group and x plus 3, yes. And there's no common, but you have a negative, then just take out as a negative. In the parentheses, you should write down x plus 3, right? You change the signs because of the negative outside. If you don't see any number, what do you have? It's 1. Remember, that is 1, right? So x plus 3 is a common. You take it out as a factor. And then x squared minus 1. Is it factorable? Yes, we should factor it. X squared minus 1 square. 1 is the same with 1 square. So it's a difference of the squares. So how do you factor? A minus b, a plus b, right? X minus 1, x plus 1. Oh, x minus 1 is wrong. So x minus 1, x plus 1. So you should write down like this, right? And then the last step, what we should do is you set each factor equal to 0. Like x plus 3 equal to 0, x minus 1 equal to 0, x plus 1 equal to 0. When you solve for x is negative 3, negative 1, and positive 1. Now we have 3 zeros. If you put this function in the calculator and see the graph, you will see the 3 zeros in the where x equal to negative 3, negative 1, and 1. Okay, we'll stop here.